There is a document sitting somewhere in your home right now, maybe in a drawer, maybe in a fireproof box. Maybe you haven't thought about it in years, but the moment you need it, and you will need it, everything stops until you find it. No document, no passport. No document, no license. No document, no bank account, no mortgage, no proof that the legal version of you exists at all. We call it a birth certificate, and we treat it like it has always been there, like it is simply part of what it means to be born into the modern world. But it hasn't always been there, and the question of why it appeared, when it appeared, how fast it spread, and what it quietly replaced is one of the most overlooked stories in modern history. For most of recorded human civilization, no government issued individual people identity documents at birth. Not the Romans, not the Greeks, not the dynasties of China or the empires of the ancient Near East. Not the kingdoms of medieval Europe. This isn't a gap in the record. It's not that those documents existed and were lost. The concept simply didn't function the way it does now. You were known through your family, through your village, through your faith community. The church recorded your baptism. The local lord counted households for taxation. The community itself was the record. You didn't need a piece of paper to confirm you were real. The people around you already knew. So what changed? The answer the history books give you is clean and comfortable. The modern state needed to track infant mortality. Cities were growing, disease was spreading. Public health officials needed data, and birth registration was the logical solution. That answer is not wrong, but it is profoundly incomplete. Because what was built didn't stop at public health. What was built became the backbone of an entirely new relationship between every human being and the government they were born under. And it happened with extraordinary speed. In the United States, serious federal momentum towards standardized birth registration began around 1902. Within 31 years, by 1933, every state in the country had joined a unified system. 31 years to transform how an entire nation recorded the existence of its people. Think about what else those 31 years contained. The Federal Reserve, established 1913. The federal income tax, ratified 1913. The first military draft requiring age verification at national scale, 1917. Social Security, 1935. Each one of these systems needed something the old parish records and household censuses could never reliably provide. They needed to find you, not your family, not your household. You, the individual, the numbered unit, the trackable person. The birth certificate made that possible. And it wasn't only America rebuilding itself around this document. Britain, France, Germany, Canada, Australia. Country after country, across different languages, different legal traditions, different forms of government, arriving at the same administrative conclusion within the same narrow window of history. Some of these nations were monarchies, some were republics, some were in the middle of political upheaval. And yet somehow, all of them looked at the individual human being and decided, this person needs to be numbered, recorded, and filed from the moment of birth. The coordination required for that, across borders, across languages, across entirely different systems of governance, is something the standard historical explanation quietly steps over. Here is something most people were never taught in school. In law, a human being and a person are not the same thing. A human being is biological. You arrived. You breathe. That's a fact of nature, not a fact of law. A person, in the legal sense, is something the state creates and recognizes. Corporations are persons. Government agencies are persons. The word traces back to the Latin persona, literally a mask. The role you play within a system. The face the institution sees when it looks at you. The birth certificate appears to be the instrument through which that legal person is created. The moment your birth is registered, a record opens. A number is assigned. And from that point forward, the state doesn't deal with you, the human being. It deals with the legal entity attached to your name. That distinction sounds abstract until you realize what it means in practice. Consider what the birth certificate actually unlocks, not symbolically, but structurally. Taxation, the social security number that follows you from birth to death, that the IRS uses to locate and assess you as an individual unit of economic productivity. That number exists because the birth registration system exists. Before it, the state taxed property, households, estates. After it, the state taxes you. Military conscription. The World War I draft required the government to verify the age and citizenship of millions of men across a vast country on an urgent timeline. Church records buried in private archives across dozens of states and languages could not have supported that mobilization. Standardized birth records could, and did. Every welfare system, every public benefit, every school enrollment, every government program built in the 20th century rests on one foundational assumption: that the state can identify you as an individual with certainty. That assumption only holds because birth registration made it hold. Now here is where this story moves into territory most historians prefer not to visit. In the same decades that birth registration was being universalized, governments were also dramatically expanding their capacity to borrow money. Bonds, national debt, borrowing against the future. And when you borrow against the future, you need collateral, something of demonstrable long-term value that justifies the loan. Some legal theorists and financial historians have raised a question that sounds strange the first time you hear it: whether the registered citizen, the numbered legal person created by the birth certificate, functions in some structural sense as part of that collateral. Not you, the living, breathing human being, but the legal entity attached to you, the tax-paying, wage-earning, economically productive person that the document created. I want to be honest about the limits of that claim. It has not been proven in the way a court would require. But the parallel is difficult to dismiss entirely. Registration, numbering, projected productivity, sovereign debt, all developing in lockstep, within the same institutions, during the same era, with almost no public debate about the deeper implications of any of it. Which brings me to the strangest silence in this entire story. When a society restructures something fundamental, the way land is owned, the way religion is practiced, the way justice is administered, there is usually a debate. People push back. Philosophers write. Newspapers argue. Citizens notice that something has changed and argue about whether the change was good. When birth registration swept across the industrialized world, that debate essentially did not happen. Not about the practical logistics, those were discussed extensively, but about the deeper question, about what it means to require a government record as the foundation of legal existence, about what is lost when the community's knowledge of you is replaced by the state's file on you, about whether any of this should have required public consent. That conversation was almost entirely absent from the mainstream discourse of the era. And I find that absence more interesting than almost anything else in this story, because here is what actually disappeared. Before the modern registration system, the way most people in most societies were recognized was through relationship. Your community knew you were born. Your neighbors witnessed your childhood. Your faith community recorded your baptism and your marriage and your death. You existed in the world through your connections to other people, not through your position in a government database. That form of recognition was imperfect. It excluded people. It could be manipulated. I'm not pretending it was a golden age, but it was fundamentally different in one important way. It was relational. Your reality was confirmed by people who knew you, people who shared your world. What replaced it was a different kind of reality, a state-administered reality. You are real because the government says so. You exist because the document says so. And if the document is ever lost, challenged, or withheld, that version of you, the legal person, the one that can own property and cross borders and open bank accounts, can effectively be made to disappear. That is not a small change. That is one of the most significant restructurings of the relationship between individuals and institutions in modern history. And it happened so fast and was framed so consistently as a practical matter. Infant mortality data, census accuracy, administrative efficiency, that most people living through it never fully grasped what was being built around them. So I'll leave you with the questions that don't have tidy answers. Why did every industrialized nation arrive at the same system within the same 30-year window? Who was carrying that idea across borders into different governments, different legal traditions, different languages, and finding the same reception everywhere they went? What was the experience of existing in the world before your life was an entry in a government ledger? Before the state's record of you was the foundation on which everything else, your rights, your access, your legal reality, was built. And what does it mean that this decision, one of the most consequential decisions ever made about the relationship between human beings and the states that govern them, was made without asking the people it would affect? You didn't choose to be registered. You were enrolled before you had language, before you had thought, before the concept of consent meant anything to you. The document that now defines your legal existence was created before you had any say in the matter. It was not created for you. It was created to contain you. And somewhere behind the public health statistics and the census efficiency reports and the administrative rationale, someone understood exactly what was being built. The question is whether we're willing to understand it too.